Hello everyone, welcome to the Creepytime Ghost Story channel, which brings you real horror stories broadcast at 6 p.m. every day. After a period of surveying and realizing that people seem to be interested in the genre of rules, from now on I will bring to everyone the real legal stories that I have collected over the past time. Tonight we're heading somewhere most Parisians will never dare to go after dark. You're standing in a quiet back street, rain slicking the cobblestones, while the hum of the city above feels miles away. There's no tour guide, no safety railing, just a narrow, rusted gate pried open by someone who definitely didn't get a permit. The air smells damp and old, like a library that's been buried for centuries. And yes, you probably won't survive this. So before you get too comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you really like what I do here. Drop your location and local time in the comments so I know where you're listening from. Now, turn down the lights, turn on the fan for some soothing background music, and let's go on our journey tonight. Jake checks the strap on his backpack, one beam of light flickering from his headlamp. You follow him down the first set of steps, narrow stone, slick with condensation. The temperature drops with each footfall, the warm breath of the city replaced by a cool, mineral air that feels almost alive. The Paris catacombs weren't meant for tourists, not really. They were an emergency solution in the late 18th century when overflowing cemeteries threatened to spread disease. In 1786, workers began transferring millions of bones from Parisian graveyards into these old limestone quarries, stacking femurs and skulls into ornate walls that stretch for miles. Every so often, your hand brushes a carved stone chisel marks from a miner who's been dead for centuries. Rule 1 is simple: getting on scene. The police do patrol these entrances, and fines aren't the worst thing that can happen. The real danger? Getting locked in. Jake tells you about a group in 2004 urban explorers who snuck in, only to find their exit welded shut overnight. They spent 12 hours trying to find another way out, their flashlight batteries draining. Some say they were guided by voices that whispered just ahead of them, but no one can prove it. As the street noise fades, you hear a new sound, water dripping somewhere far away. The echo magnified until it feels like it's right beside you. Jake pauses, listening. "Keep moving," he mutters. It's not just about staying ahead of trouble, it's about momentum. People who stop in the first kilometer have a habit of turning back, and turning back alone here is worse than pushing forward in the dark. Remember the story of Philibert Espert, the doorkeeper of the Val de Grace Hospital in 1793? He entered these tunnels looking for a hidden liquor cache and never came out alive. His skeleton was found 11 years later, just meters from an exit, his lantern long extinguished. Historians debate if he got lost or if someone led him astray. Do ghosts really exist, or is it just the catacombs playing tricks on the mind? You squeeze through a low arch, the stone cold against your shoulder, and the passage opens into a wider chamber. The walls here are covered in graffiti, not modern tags, but centuries-old inscriptions. Some mark the names of quarry workers. Others list dates of revolutionary battles fought above. There's a strange comfort in knowing you are following in the footsteps of both the living and the dead. Jake stops suddenly and clicks off his light. The darkness is absolute, like ink swallowing the air. Then you hear footsteps, slow, deliberate, coming from behind. When the beam flicks back on, the tunnel is empty. Jake smirks. Happens down here, could be echoes from the street above or something else. Either way, you keep walking deeper and deeper, because the descent has already begun. And the only thing more dangerous than going forward is standing still. The tunnel narrows, forcing you to turn sideways to pass. Jake runs his hand along the wall until his fingers graze a faint white line. It's no wider than a piece of chalk actually. It is chalk marking a path left by someone before you. Rule 2. Never stray from the chalk marks. It sounds simple until you see how easily it could happen. The catacombs aren't one continuous hallway, they're a tangled labyrinth of branching tunnels, false dead ends, and sudden drops. In the beam of your headlamp, you can see 3 other corridors splitting off from where you stand. 2 are unmarked mouths of darkness that seem to breathe cold air. One has that thin chalk streak, barely visible. You follow it. Jake explains as you go. Cataphiles, those who explore these tunnels regularly, use chalk to leave signs for each other. A single arrow means a safe route. 2 arrows, exit ahead. A circle with a slash through it, don't go there. He pauses before one such mark, a thick, uneven cross, and doesn't bother explaining. He just keeps walking the other way. There's history written into every twist here. In the early 19th century, the catacombs were mapped for the first time by an inspector named Hericard de Thury. It took years to chart even the accessible sections, and even then, some areas were deliberately left unmapped. Too dangerous, the report said. But danger isn't always about cave-ins or unstable stone. Some of these passages lead to places you're not supposed to see. Jake tells you about the man in 2010 who decided to prove he could find his own way without chalk or a map. He was experienced over 20 trips into the catacombs and thought he knew the paths by memory. Searchers found his body days later in a sealed-off section known for bad air pockets. His flashlight had burned out. In his pocket, a notebook with scrawled rules, the first of which read, "Always follow the chalk." Do ghosts really exist? Or does the mind start making company for itself in this kind of darkness? Some urban explorers swear they've heard voices calling their names. Others insist they've seen someone step just around the corner, only to find no one there. The chalk line ahead dips down, leading you into a lower passage where the ceiling grazes the top of your headlamp. You crouch instinctively. Here, the air smells different, more earthy, almost metallic. Jake slows his pace. Hear that? At first, you don't, then you do. Faint, irregular tapping, like a metal pipe being struck far away. He shakes his head. Could be water, could be something else. Don't think about it, just keep to the line. You think of Philibert again, lost just steps from safety. And suddenly the chalk under your fingertips feels like the only thing keeping you tethered to the living world. The line leads you past a wall of bones stacked neatly, skulls facing outward. Each hollow eye socket seems to watch as you pass. The arrangement isn't random. These are the result of 18th century burial transfers, when workers placed remains in decorative patterns to give some dignity to the dead. Over time, though, visitors have quietly shifted bones for their own purposes, marking territory, building strange shapes, even leaving offerings. Jake tells you about a chamber where skulls have been arranged into a perfect circle, with candles melted into the sockets. That was the night he saw a shadow move inside the circle, though the candles were unlit. "I left," he says simply, "and I didn't look back." You don't need to be told twice. You keep to the chalk, moving forward, because if there's one thing you've learned tonight, it's that the Paris catacombs don't forgive curiosity. The chalk line curves sharply to the right, guiding you into a tunnel that suddenly widens into a long, vaulted corridor. Here, the air feels heavier, as though it's carrying the weight of centuries on every breath. Jake slows, his headlamp beam grazing faded inscriptions carved into the stone. You run your fingers over the letters French dates from the late 1702nd, many of them clustered around the years 1789 to 1794. These walls hold echoes of the revolution. During those turbulent years, When the streets of Paris above ran red with political unrest, the catacombs became both a hiding place and a dumping ground. Some say members of the revolutionary government used these passages to store contraband, meet in secret, or even dispose of bodies. Jake's voice drops. If you hear voices down here, they might be arguing about politics from 2 centuries ago. It sounds like a joke, but you've heard enough stories to know better. Historians debate whether revolutionary figures actually ventured this deep. Some accounts suggest that royalist sympathizers were smuggled through the tunnels to avoid execution, while others insist the catacombs were too unstable to risk. Still, in 1794, workers discovered a pile of fresh remains among centuries-old bones, an unsettling reminder that not all burials here were part of the official transfers. A faint noise makes you pause, whispers, just beyond the edge of your light. You turn, but the corridor is empty. Jake doesn't seem to notice. Instead, he points to a carved emblem in the wall, a crude outline of a guillotine. People like to leave messages for each other, he murmurs, or warnings. He tells you the true story of a modern explorer named Luke, who came down here alone in 1998. Luke was fascinated by the revolutionary graffiti and wanted to document every carving. On his last trip, he radioed a friend above ground, saying he just found a new chamber filled with skeletal remains arranged in a spiral. That was the last anyone heard from him. Search teams never found the spiral, or Luke. Do ghosts really exist? Or do the tunnels simply amplify paranoia until explorers hear what they expect to hear? Some cataphiles claim the catacombs have dead zones, where sound behaves strangely, where your own footsteps seem to come from behind you, or where whispers travel further than shouts. The chalk line continues, leading you into an ossuary where the bones are arranged with an unsettling precision. A plaque above the entry reads, "Arrête, c'est ici l'Empire de la Mort, stop." This is the Empire of Death. You step through anyway. It's here that you hear again whispers, but this time, they're distinct. They sound like French, but you can't catch the words. Jake glances at you, frowning. "Don't respond," he says. "Not even if you think you understand." The rule seems ridiculous until you remember his earlier story about the explorers who follow voices deeper and deeper, only to find themselves miles from any known exit. When rescue came, they were sitting silently in the dark, as if waiting for someone who never arrived. In the far corner of the ossuary, a skull lies apart from the others, resting in a small alcove. Its placement feels deliberate, like a lone sentinel. You resist the urge to touch it. Jake doesn't even glance its way. He's already moving forward, trusting the chalk. Still, you can't help but feel that something back there is watching you leave. The chalk line narrows into a tunnel where your footsteps splash instead of crunch. The floor slopes gently downward, and the air turns damp and clammy. A faint trickle echoes somewhere ahead, carrying a mineral tang that sticks to the back of your throat. Rule 3. Avoid the water chambers. It's not superstition, at least, not entirely. The catacombs intersect with old underground springs and forgotten sewer lines, and some chambers flood unpredictably. The water can rise overnight, trapping anyone unlucky enough to be inside. Worse, some of it carries toxins from centuries-old industrial runoff, enough to make you dizzy, or worse, if you breathe too long in the enclosed space. Jake slows to a stop just before the water line. "We can skirt it," he says, pointing to a narrow ledge carved into the wall. It's barely a foot wide, slick with moss. You press your back against the cold stone and step carefully, the beam of your headlamp catching ripples on the black surface below. Somewhere in this flooded chamber, Jake explains, lies a collapsed access point to the Seine. In 1910, during the Great Flood of Paris. Water surged through the catacombs faster than anyone could react. Entire sections disappeared beneath the river. Some never drained again. There's a story of a group of workers who went missing trying to seal off a breach. Their tools were found days later, but not their bodies. The ledge turns a corner, and for a moment, you lose sight of the chalk. That's when you see it movement in the water. Not the lazy ripple of current, but something sharp, deliberate, like a hand brushing the surface. Jake doesn't look down. "Don't stop," he says flatly. Do ghosts really exist? Or does the human mind invent shapes to fit the fears we've carried for generations? You think of the urban explorer in 2017 who filmed himself crossing a similar water chamber. Midway through, the audio caught a faint splash behind him. When he turned, the water was calm, but something had left wet footprints on the ledge he just crossed. He never went back. The air grows colder as you pass an arched alcove. Inside, half submerged, is a carved stone chair. Jake mutters that it's been here for at least a century, but no one knows who put it there or why the bones stacked around it form a perfect semicircle. "Keep moving," he urges, his tone sharper now. Water reflects more than light. The phrase sticks with you as you finally step onto dry stone again. Behind you, the chamber lies still. The ripple's gone. Ahead, the chalk line reappears, like it had been waiting for you. You don't look back. The tunnel widens, and for the first time in hours, you can stand fully upright without your headlamp brushing the ceiling. The air here feels different, stale, yes, but also warmer. Almost as if it's been recently disturbed. The chalk line leads straight toward a low archway marked by two skulls perched like sentinels. Beyond it, your light spills into a wide chamber that takes your breath away. Bones, thousands of them, aren't just stacked along the walls here. They're arranged. Femurs form intricate lattice patterns, skulls positioned in perfect rows, some grinning, others cracked and weathered. In the center, a massive table of stone supports a careful pyramid of remains. Jake exhales slowly. "The Feast of Bones," he murmurs, like he's naming an old friend he'd hoped never to see again. It's not an official site on any map, but cataphiles whisper about it, a chamber shaped by hands that care less about memorials and more about rituals. Historians know that in the 18th century, the catacombs became a curiosity for the Parisian elite. Secret tours were conducted by lantern light, where noblemen and women would drink wine and listen to live music among the dead. Some even dined here, seated on borrowed church pews hauled into the tunnels. Jake tells you about the 1897 Concert of the Dead, a documented event where musicians played Chopin and Saint-Saëns to an invited audience. It was meant as an artistic statement, but some guests reported feeling unseen hands brushing against them during the performance. Do ghosts really exist? Or was it the mind reacting to the oppressive darkness? Hard to say, but the Feast of Bones feels older than any concert, older than any dinner party. The patterns in the bones seem deliberate, not decorative. You remember another true story Jake shares in a low voice about a pair of urban explorers in 2009 who stumbled onto this chamber, one filmed while the other examined the table. The footage shows the man standing still, staring at something just out of frame before suddenly dropping the camera. When they reviewed the tape later, the audio picked up a faint sound like the scraping of bone on stone. Jake walks around the table without stepping too close. You follow, careful to avoid brushing against the skeletal patterns. Out of the corner of your eye, you swear a skull at the edge of the pyramid shifts slightly, just enough to change the angle of its hollow gaze. When you blink, it's still. The chalk line resumes on the other side of the chamber, as if leading you away from the table's pool. Jake doesn't speak again until you've passed through another narrow arch. "Whatever you do," he says quietly, Don't eat down here, not even a snack. You don't want to be part of the feast. You don't ask what he means. The chalk line snakes into a corridor so narrow you have to angle your shoulders just to pass. The air is cooler again, the damp smell of limestone mingling with something faintly metallic. Jake keeps glancing over his shoulder, not because he's worried about you lagging behind, but as if he's checking whether the passage itself is the same one he entered. Rule 4. Though Jake hasn't said it aloud yet, never trust the same tunnel twice. It's an old cataphile saying, and it doesn't mean the tunnels physically move, at least not in a way science can explain. But down here, distance feels elastic. Paths loop back to places they shouldn't, corridors appear that aren't on any map, and familiar landmarks seem just slightly wrong when you pass them again. Some chalk lines even vanish, as though they were never drawn. Jake tells you about a 1983 exploration by a group of students from the Sorbonne. They charted their route meticulously, photographing every junction. Yet when they try to return, the tunnels ahead has shifted the chalk arrows pointed into solid stone, and the map no longer matched the layout. They made it out hours later through an exit miles from where they started, without crossing any known connections between the 2 points. Do ghosts really exist, or does isolation warp perception until you can't trust your own memory? Some say the catacombs have echo loops, not just of sound, but of space. You can walk in a straight line and still end up where you began. The corridor widens into a chamber with 2 exits, both marked faintly with chalk. Jake hesitates, then chooses the left. 10 minutes later, you emerge into another chamber, identical to the first. Even the bones stacked along the walls form the same pattern. Jake stops. We're in it, he says. The shift. The only way out is to keep moving without doubling back, even if the path feels wrong. He moves faster now, ignoring side passages and strange marks that look like chalk but aren't. The air seems to press in, as if the stone itself is leaning closer. You remember his earlier warning, never stop in the first kilometer. Now you understand, because stopping here in this shifting place might mean never finding the way forward again. A final turn reveals a set of steps carved into the rock, climbing toward a faint, almost unreal light. But as you start to ascend, you glance back down the corridor and freeze. The chamber below is empty, but the chalk line you followed here is already fading, the white dust dissolving into the stone. Jake doesn't look back. Come on, he says, before it's gone.